Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Let's return to our top story. In the past hour, Sky News has learned that Japanese car manufacturer Honda preparing to announce the closure of its factory in Swindon, dealing a devastating blow to its 3,500-strong workforce. 3,500 people likely to lose their jobs when the factory closes in 3 years' time. More on that with Ed Conway, who's our economics editor. Hello to you. This is properly devastating stuff.
It's a real shock, and I think, for employees of Honda as well who've been asking this question as well over recent weeks, and as far as many of them have heard, the company has been committed to its factory in Honda. They said whatever happens with Brexit, not long ago, they said whatever happens with Brexit, they will be committed to Swindon. So this comes as a big shock. It's just been broken by Mark Kleiman, our city editor, and obviously you'll remember he also broke that Nissan story about them not building the X-Trail in the UK. We're expecting confirmation from Honda within potentially 24 hours, and it'll be interesting to see how they phrase it. But what Mark has heard is that this isn't just, a lot of people might be expected to say this is all about Brexit. No, as far as they're concerned, this is a business-based decision. It'll be interesting to see whether they mention Brexit when it comes to explaining why they've taken it.
What was the vote in Swindon?
Well, they voted leave by about 54%, so it was quite a strong leave vote.
Yeah.
So 3,500 people work in the Swindon plant there. As anyone who lives in the area will know, it is a big employer. It's a big part of local culture. It's been there for 30 years. Yeah. And the interesting thing about
factory actually that you can see as you drive along the motorway.
You can see it on the motorway,
yeah.
And this is a big hub for production of cars, and the interesting thing in particular about Honda in Swindon is, unlike some other car manufacturers, they're not reliant on government grants. Remember, the big thing with Nissan was that the government was going to give it £61 billion million pounds of aid. Billion would have been quite nice.
That would have been nice.
But £61 million, which is not insignificant over the course of the future years. Yeah. Honda haven't received those kind of grants, at least over the past few years. I've been looking at the details. All the other car manufacturers have. It's here in the UK because the UK is one of the big hubs for making cars, in particular engines. And the concern, and this is what it really comes back to here, is that the big speciality the UK really has is diesel engines. And we all know with diesel, there's been big problems with diesel gates, with emissions over the course of the last few years. So you're seeing big issues kind of spread across
And
the
is that why
here.
particularly the car manufacturers are taking the hit at the moment?
It's partly why car manufacturers are taking a hit, but also they tend to be at the kind of leading edge of the market at the moment. If you're going to cut back on a big purchase, often it's going to be your car. And that's one of the reasons why often it's car manufacturers who see the first impact when people cut back. And that's what happened during the financial crisis, isn't it? Remember, we had all the problems with car makers in the UK. We had the scrappage scheme, remember that? That was one of the ways that the government tried to deal with the financial crisis. And in the US as well, they had to be bailed out, many of the car makers over there. It always provokes a big reaction when we see this, and it will be, I'm sure, reflected on by politicians around the country, and indeed in particular in Swindon.
Just looking actually at your thought on this would be great. Our political editor Faisal Islam tweeting saying a year ago the Japanese ambassador was in Downing Street. He was unusually candid after a meeting with the PM, with Nissan, Toyota, Honda, others. If there's no profitability of continuing operations in the UK, no private company can continue operations, simple as that. This is all high stakes. All of us need to keep in mind.
I think that's right. And I think, the fact that Brexit and the uncertainty over Brexit, whatever kind of arrangement we come to, it may be positive, it may be negative, but there is uncertainty because no one knows what that's going to be. That's not helping any of these long-term business decisions. And that's indeed what Nissan said only a couple of weeks ago when they were talking about the X-Trail and whether they were going to make it in the UK or Japan. Brexit uncertainty hasn't helped. This is a business decision. I think we'll probably hear the similar things from Honda as well. It was a business-based decision. It simply wasn't economical in the long run to keep this factory going. It's going to go all the way through to 2022, but that's the question of running it down. And instead, those cars are going to be made, and it's mainly the Civic. The UK is the big hub for making Civics internationally. They're going to be made back in Japan. But part of the reason for that, why is that? It's partly, one would presume, because Japan now has a trade deal with Europe, which means it doesn't have to pay those high tariffs anymore. So you can make the cars in Japan and not have to pay the tariffs if you're going to bring them across to the EU. So there is an element that's related to the EU and to trade deals there, if not directly towards Brexit. But it's an enormous decision, potentially.
Bottom line is 3,500 people likely to find out tomorrow that they're not going to have a job.
Yeah,
OK,
shock.
Ed, for now, thanks. Shall we bring in our correspondent Tom Parmenter, who's standing by at the plant in Swindon for us? I'm not sure that they've necessarily heard the news yet. Likely to be made official, what, tomorrow, Tom?
That is the plan, although because it has leaked out this afternoon, it may well be that that is brought forward, but a very, very difficult day for everyone connected to this plant. You only have to drive into Swindon, as I've just done, then you just see how many Honda cars are on the roads in this part of Wiltshire. It is a fundamental part of this town's economy, and of course, it's not just the people employed at this plant, it's everyone else who, of course, earns a living off the back of it, whether it's someone who runs a sandwich van or a newsagents or people actually in the supply chain, feeding in the bits to this factory to make the cars that they churn out, over 100,000 or so a year. A hugely difficult decision to digest. Of course, there had been things that in hindsight could now be interpreted as very significant warning signs. In February of this year, fixed-term contract staff were told that they would be being let go, and agency workers likewise. But the workers here, up until just this Friday gone, were being told that there was a commitment to this plant and that moving this scale of production would be logistically very difficult indeed. They were expecting, and they are still scheduled to have a shutdown, a brief temporary shutdown, as many car plants are during the Brexit period, as we just try to digest and see how that is going to play out for car manufacturing, which of course relies on that last-minute arrival of parts to go onto the assembly lines to make the vehicles that roll out of here, and have done for the last 30 years or so. I've just been speaking to the editor of the local newspaper. He's described this as a terrible day for the town. They are just trying to get their heads around all this because, as I say, they were getting those reassurances that there was a viable future here, but although it is the very worst of decisions that is likely to be announced in the next 24 hours, we know that it won't be, in all likelihood, until 2022. There is some breathing space. That is very little consolation for all those people around dinner tables tonight in Swindon and beyond who rely on this place for their job, their mortgage payments, their bills, and of course that is all changing.
OK, thank you. Likely to receive a formal announcement tomorrow, but the news coming from our city editor, Mark Kleiman, that it would appear that Honda is to close its plant in Swindon with the loss of 3,500 jobs.